Okay. Because of my miscalculation, I had thought, or I had assumed, that today everyone had learned already Perek Kaf Bet, but I realize now that's tomorrow's Perek. So, as I go through it, I'll be a little bit elaborate, but now I'll just discuss basically. Basically, the children, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuben, have stayed on throughout their promised period of the capture and inheritance of the land, and they are permitted to go back by the leaders, and as they go back, they build an altar, a huge altar. Bnei Am Yisrael consider that a dangerous act. We'll see why. And they start rebuking them, and they threaten with military force. They assume that this might be an idolatrous act, and they remind them of the ancient sins of peor, idolatry. They remind them of the sin of Achan. They invite them to come, if they want, Mizbeach, to go and live in Eretz Yisrael with them. Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, Hatzi Menashe clarify their motivations and their actions, that it's just a unifying reminder that we're all one people, and everything, and war is averted, and it seems that there's this very nice, happy ending. So, I'm not one that enjoys happy endings. So, right, that you can take off the tape. Yeah. Usually, non-happy endings usually are a little bit more realistic and usually better stories. So, when we're done with that, we'll come back. Really, in order to understand this, as you have seen, I think I've done this every single time, you really can't learn Yehoshua without going back to the Chumash every time. So, this is our final session on Yehoshua, so I'm going back to the Chumash. And you can pretty much guess the story I want to talk about in the Chumash, because the parallels here are striking. In both cases, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven approach or do something to the leader of the Jewish people. In both cases, they are rebuked. In both cases, the leader reminds them of ancient sins that they seem to be repeating. In both cases, they seem to have to clarify their motivations. And in both cases, peace comes at the end. So, what is happening here? So we really need to go back to the case of B'midbar Lamid Bet Aleph. So open your Tanachim to B'midbar Lamid Bet Aleph. And, okay, we'll read it together a little bit. Umikne Rav haya libnei Reuven v'libnei Gad. Okay, umikne Rav. So let's even as we read this story in Chumash, let's think of parallels here, right? Let's think of parallels. What's happening? Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven have a lot of mikneh, right? And because of their mikneh, they believe the land of Israel can't hold that mikneh along with their brethren in Eretz Yisrael. So they decide to separate from their brethren in Eretz Yisrael and cross the Jordan River and live there. That should sound familiar to somebody who did that exact same fact. Yes. And by the way, you might think that Kikar Yarden is on, and Sidom is on the western side. In reality, Kikar Yarden is probably on the eastern Jordanian plains. So just keep that in mind. We're going to get back to that. We will get back to that. But already you read Miknei Rav, and you're already thinking. You know, the sensitive readers are thinking, Miknei Rav, we're going on. Oh my, there's someone else who did this. Right? And lived in the exact spot where these people are going to live. But okay, we'll come back. Now, the first question that any sensitive reader asks, and I'm sure you've asked it many times, we all know the story of Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuben, right? What happens? They go, they say, we don't want to cross the Jordan, we want to stay here. And what happens? Moshe gets angry. How could you do that? This is what the Miraglim did. You are now sinners in their light, and look what happened to Miraglim. Look at the disaster that they caused. And then what happens? They said, no. We'll go, we'll fight, we'll go infantry, we're going to stay there till the land is given out, and then we'll come back. And Moshe says, okay. The question that we're going to ask, the first question was, did Moshe read their intentions correctly? And they had to backtrack? Or did Moshe make a mistake and they explained themselves? Our Mefarshim are on both sides of the fence here, right? The Ramban says that, is this? Okay. The Ramban says that really Moshe didn't read them properly. Moshe, he was afraid. He says, here it is. He says, V'hinei Moshe hashad otam, ki yomru ken mipad anshe ha'ar eretz Canaan. V'lechen amar lahem she'enam botchem b'Hashem kavotav. He didn't trust. They didn't trust. Right? He was suspicious of them. V'yosef od lahanisham kahem lanicham b'midbar v'lachen anu oto halila shenira mehem aval na'avor halutzim l'chama v'niyeh mehirim v'rishonim lifnei ha'am nilachem be'oivei Hashem ki lachmenu hem. Right? Ki lachmenu hem. Who's he quoting? He's quoting the good Meraglim. Right? In other words, of course, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven didn't mean that. Like Ramban, also Abarbanel. Abarbanel says, yes, they misunderstood, they misread. Moshe misread their intentions. The Akedah Yitzhak Arama has the opposite. He says, no. Moshe read their intentions very clearly. Moshe knew exactly what they meant. And in fact, they had the intention of not going across. But what happened? Moshe rebuked them, so they had to change their offer. And if we take a look at some of the psukim, let's try now. This is an important argument. It's not just about did Moshe know or didn't he know. The entire message of this story is dependent on this argument. According to the Ramban and Abarbanel, the righteous people are wrongly accused by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu seems to be pictured as an aging leader who's used to the previous generation, who were not as righteous as this new generation that want to fight, that want to go in, that want to be Yoresh the land. They have this practical problem, so they want to stay here. But according to Akedah Yitzhak, that's the opposite. Moshe Rabbeinu is very in tune with the people. Not only is he in tune with the problems, he makes a command performance, and this is the last one, and saves the day. He averts potentially what could have been an incident that could have had tragic consequences, maybe even a repeat of Het HaMeraglim. And he rebukes a people that are somewhat rebellious. I'd like to read a little bit and see what happens here and read this story. I'm going to go now to Bamidbar Lamidbet and read a little bit of the story. And let's see if we can start taking some cues from the Peshat into which Perush seems to be closer. So watch now. Vayavo Bamin Perek Lamidbet Pasuk Bet. Vayavo Bnei Gad uBnei Reuben. Vayomru el Moshe ve'el Elazar HaKohen ve'el Nesi'ah Edah lemor. First thing they say. Atarot ve'divon ve'yazer ve'nimra ve'heshbon ve'el aleh u'shvam unvo u'bon. All right. That's how they introduce this story. They just mention cities. Haaretz asher hika Adonai lifnei adat Yisrael eretz mikneh hi ve'lavadecha mikneh. Now, that's the whole first part of their speech. How do I know that? Because the next word is vayomeru, meaning we have a pause. So what does that mean? So Abba Barnea says, you know what's happening here? They're like nervous. They're going to Moshe. How are we going to ask Moshe this? So we're going to, let's just hint. Oh, by the way, Moshe, okay, all these cities, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do? Leave them? Aib, ha'aretz asher hika Hashem lifnei adat Yisrael. God conquered these lands. What are we going to do with these people? And by the way, it's Eretz Mikneh, and just in case you haven't noticed, we have Mikneh. That's exactly what I just did. What I just did is exactly what Moshe did. Okay. He didn't take the hint. Yeah. All right. So what do you want? It's very nice. Okay, that's a good fact. Thank you for telling me that. And what's next? So there's no question. There's tense silence. And the Torah sort of puts the end of a pirasha. And now, okay, didn't work. Moshe didn't take the hint. And of course we know Moshe seems purposely not to take the hint. Because he knows where things are going. Now they have to say it. Very uncomfortably they have to say it. Well, two ways. Al ta'avirenu ta'arden for a nahala, but we'll go to fight. Or al ta'avirenu ta'arden, period. We're staying here. So it seems al ta'avirenu ta'arden, especially with the vayomeru and that tense beginning, right? There was something. The Pshat seems to indicate that they weren't really planning to go. And of course we know Moshe Rabbeinu has a few complaints. Now I'm going to register them. I want you to keep them in the back of your mind. He says, first of all, it's unjust. It's wrong. You're separating yourselves from them. So we have a problem. Problem A, keep this in mind. The separating of themselves from their brethren. Problem B, problem B, which is very different. You're going to influence them to do bad. And then he goes back to the Miragilim. Now it's an important mention of the Miragilim. This is what the Miragilim did. What did they do? Well, they really did two things. And we have a whole story. They rejected Eretz Yisrael on the one hand, but vayaniu et lev Bnei Yisrael. They had a bad influence. And he goes back to the whole story, 40 shana. And now you, הנה קמתם תחת אבותיכם, תרבות אנשים חטאים. Why? כי תשובון, אמן תדבב, כי תשובון מאחריו ויאסף עוד להניחו במדבר ושיחתם לכל העם הזה. This is going to be worse. They'll be destroyed in the desert. Now, let's think. If Moshe was reading them wrong, what should happen? They should correct it right away. Do they correct this right away? No. Why not? How do you know? Right. So first of all, that's the end of a pirasha. So think of the end of a pirasha as the end of the story. And then the next word is vayigeshu elav. Meaning, okay, why do they have to be nigash to Moshe? They're there. What happened? They went home. They went into a huddle. They went into a discussion. They went into a conference room. They had a board meeting, whatever you want to say, and they discussed this. Well, what are we going to do? And we come back. Okay, Moshe, here's our offer. Gidratzon. By the way, we're going to be the infantry. And we're going to stay there. And we're going to stay there till Lo nashuv el batenu ad hitnahel b'nei Yisrael ish nahalato. Oh, wow. What would you expect? Moshe should say, unbelievable, you guys are great. But he doesn't have anything to say. Okay. All right. If you do that, it's fine. They're going beyond. So first of all, the fact that they're going beyond what they should have gone, that shows that there's something wrong here. They had to offer something. And second, because otherwise, if they were just clarifying and said, no, we'll be like everybody else. They're going beyond what they had to do, and Moshe is not so impressed. He says, okay. So it would seem from all of these that the Akedah Yitzhak seems to be the reading closer to the Pshat, and so therefore for the rest of our discussion, I'm going to base it on that reading. That Reuben and Gad's case was rejected, and Moshe complained about it, and however, they attempted to solve the problem. Or did they? What was their answer? Their answer was, no. Did they? What was Moshe's concerns?
They won't go ahead and fight in the battle and say, we will be the first to the battle.
So we will be in the first battle. We'll be in the front lines. And what else? And we're not gonna scare off the people, correct? We won't. Right. So they're showing there's a love for Eretz Yisrael. No, they're showing they're going in first. They're not scared, and don't worry about the people. You're worried that we're going to be scared and we're going to scare off the people. Don't worry. Watch. We're going to go in first. No one's going to get scared. They're going to see us courage. They're going to come in. Adrabah, we're going to encourage them to fight. Nevertheless, we'd have to figure that what? That there's some bittersweetness here because they are still rejecting the land. And Moshe Rabbeinu, we take a look. I skipped one pasuk. Lamed bet yutet. Ki lo ninhalita me'ever leyaden v'hala. What is their offer? We will not inherit in this part of Eretz Israel. Ki ba nahalatenu elenu me'ever yarden mizraha. Our inheritance will be in the Mizrah. In other words, we're going to inherit the Mizrah instead of the Ma'arav, which is okay. It's just part of one land. We're going to transfer our inheritance from one to the other. We're still part of the larger piece. We're just going to have our inheritance on the other side. So Moshe Rabbeinu is somewhat satisfied with their arguments. He says, Im tehaltzu lifnei Hashem l'melchama. Yes, if you go, and you go halutz, and you wait till nichbesha haaretz. I'm in pasuk kaf gimel. V'nichbesha haaretz lifnei Adonai. V'ashar yashuvu. V'yitem nikiyim mi'Hashem. You will be clean of God, meaning from your promise. But there's a double entendre there. You'll be clean from Hashem. Ume Yisrael. What is he saying? Your promise to Hashem and to Yisrael, not Achichem, to Yisrael is done. Meaning you are not part of Yisrael. You are a distinct body from Yisrael. והייתה הארץ הזאת לכם, not לנחלה, but לאחוזה. It will be a possession, not an inheritance. You will possess the land, yes. This is not like Nahalat Eretz Israel. You're a distinct body on the other side. You do that? Okay. You fulfilled your obligation. You've done what you had to do. Moshe Rabbeinu's concerns of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuben, on the one hand, all right, I'll cut my losses. At least they are not influencing the rest of Am Yisrael for bad. They're rejecting it. Okay. They think it's a hanahala. Let me point out that it's a huzah, and I'll move on. And of course, we find in his answer a few other points here that he changes, right? The famous change everyone knows is, they put the mikneh before the kids, and he puts the kids before the mikneh, right? But that's an important change. We often hear that in elementary school, but we have to remember, the mikneh, what did it represent? The mikneh in the mind is the lot mentality, the materialism, the understanding that I choose the place because of mikneh. What is Moshe telling them? Just telling them, oh, by the way, you got to think, you got it all backwards. You're choosing because of mikneh. The first word in the parasha is mikneh. This is all about mikneh, right? A word, by the way, that in the entire parasha, Moshe doesn't say. He says, Sonechem, you're all about mikneh, but you should think about something else. Your future, your children, their education. It's not going to be so easy as you thought. Your values are backwards. You're picking the place for the wrong ideals. Again, remember the mikneh is the lot. Lot chooses mikneh. Lot lives in the wrong place. Mikneh, by the way, who else rejected one land in favor of another land because of their mikneh? Just the son? No. Yosef's brothers, right. Yosef's brothers, right? They reject Mitzrayim and they move to Goshen because of mikneh. Of course, it's a ruse, but that's it. So the concept of mikneh is a rejection of one land and choosing another land. That motif is clear here. It's a rejection of Eretz Yisrael and choosing what? Ever HaYarden. And there is no question. So we have a rejection of Eretz Yisrael, a separation from Bnei Yisrael. You are naki to Hashem, you are naki from Yisrael. And in addition, Moshe inserts the all-important words when he tells them, you really better keep your promise. It's not, because Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuben, Avadecha yasu kasher Adoni mitzaveh, right? Tapenu, nashenu, miknenu, choyu sham b'arei Gilad, and we will go lifnei Hashem lamilchama kasher Adoni dober. Right? The concept of lifnei Hashem, you better remember that this is halutz lamilchama lifnei Hashem. Okay, and he tells them, untatem et eretz hagilad, again, in pasuk kafter at the end, la'ahuzah, a possession, and ahuzah versus Nahala. Okay. And by the way, do they fully get it? In Pasuk Lamed Bet, Nahnu na'avor halutzim lifnei Hashem eretz Kna'an, ve'itanu ahuzat nahalatenu me'eved layarden. They don't really get this point. Moshe is telling it to them, but they don't seem to want to hear it. So, very nice. Okay, that's what we say.
What's the difference legally between
Ahuzah, I don't know about the legalities here, but ahuzah is a possession, right? You have an ahuzah. You could purchase an ahuzah. If I purchase a sadeh, that's called in the Torah a sadeh ahuzah. Ahuzah is something that I take hold of. It's a possession, right? It's not an inheritance. A nahala is a direct inheritance, right? They have an inheritance to Eretz Yisrael. Their possession of the land in Sihon and Og, is an ahuzah, an acquisition. And therefore, it is not to be confused They do not. They are, as Moshe is very clear, this is not in lieu of a Nahala in Eretz Israel, right? It's not in lieu of that. You want to take possession of that land, that's fine, but understand you are a distinct body outside of the gamut of Israel. And that has to be understood as clear. This is not I'm getting this Nahala instead of that. This is not an exchange. Moshe is very clear on that. And Moshe continuously uses the word ahuzah, and they go back to the word Nahala.
He was planning on giving them a Nahala in Israel, even so?
No. They would give up. They would forfeit their Nahala. They're not going to take that. They're going, they don't want, Al Tavid take them. They don't want it. They're relinquishing that Nahala. They're relinquishing that right.
They're saying Moshe is in effect cutting them off.
No, they're cutting themselves off. Moshe is just pointing that out. They're cutting themselves off, and Moshe is just pointing it out. Now, there's a very strange episode, which we'll get back to if we have time towards the end, with this half of Menashe story. Right? You have Reuben, Gad, and half of Menashe somehow get in here, and over there, Moshe seems to somehow be a proactive person in giving them land over there, which not going to fully fit exactly what we're talking about, but in case it's bothering you now, don't worry. I'll try and get back to it towards the end. Time allotted. Now, that seems to be what's happening here. Now let's go to the story in Yehoshua. Yehoshua Kaf Bet. Okay. Very nice beginning. Az yikra Yehoshua leRuveni v'legadi v'lehatzi b'nei Menashe, and he tells them, Atem shmartem et kol tzivatchem Moshe eved Hashem. You did it. You fulfilled your obligation. Lo azavtem et achechem ze yamim rabim. You stayed here. Ad hayom hazeh. Ve'ata ini Hashem lekochem le'achechem kasher diber lehem. Your brothers have inherited, like they said. Ve'ata pnu. Go. Ulchu lahem la'alechem. Go back to your aholim, to your tents. El eretz ahuzatchem. Land of your possession. Asher natan lachem Moshe evet Hashem. Moshe gave it to you. Be'ever hayarden. Go ahead. Have a good life. You have ahuzah. Moshe gave it to you. Not God. Moshe. Rak, by the way, you know, I want to give you a little, I have to tell you, Shimru me'od la'asot et ha'mitzvah v'et ha'torah she'sivatchem Moshe evet Hashem. Do me a favor, as you're leaving, I hope you keep the Torah and the mitzvot. You know, it reminds you of like the story of in the 20s and the 30s, the guy's leaving the yeshiva, he's moving to America, and the Chafetz Chaim tells him, please make sure you keep Shabbat. Well, I keep Shabbat. I've been in yeshiva for 10 years. Just please, you know, he gives him the beracha. I'll see you later, and please keep the Torah. Do the best you can over there. Right? ללכת בכל דרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו ולדבקה בו ולעובדו בכל לב ובכל נפשכם. ויברכם יהושע. He blessed them. וישלחם. He sent them. וילכו אל אהליהם. Right? And then we have the Hatzi Menashe story. Half and half. And something happens. Right? After the goodbye speech, after told Go la'ahuzatchem, they seem to finally get the problem. They seem to finally understand what Moshe was telling them. This is goodbye. This is it. You know, it's this nice. We hung out 14 years. We were together. We went. It's goodbye. It's over. We're leaving. We're leaving these people. We're leaving this land. And that's what Moshe was warning. That problem we didn't satisfy. That problem we never fixed. So as they understand that, וישובו וילכו בני ראובן בני גד וחצי שבט מנשה מאת בני ישראל. So now they see something. They're leaving Bnei Israel. Look at the repetitive. מאת בני ישראל משילו אשר בארץ כנען. It's a rejection of three things. The connection to Am Yisrael, the sanctity of the Mishkan, which was in Shiloh, and the land of Israel. Lalechet el Eretz HaGil'ad asher Eretz Ahuzatam. Now they got it. No more Nahala. Asher nohazu ba al pi Hashem biyad Moshe. Vayavol Gilot Yarden. They're about to pass the Yarden. Vayivnu Bnei Reuben Bnei Gad v'Hatzi Shevet Masham Mizbeach al Yarden Mizbeach Gadol leMar'eh. They built a huge Mizbeach. וישמעו בני ישראל לאמור, הנה באנו בני ראובן בני גד וחצי שבט מנשה את המזבח אל מול ארץ כנען אל גדות הירדן אל עבר בני ישראל וישמעו בני ישראל ויקהלו. They gather, called up בני ישראל Shiloh לעלות אליהם לצבא. They gather where? In Shiloh. What is in Shiloh? The Mishkan. They're incensed. Now what do they accuse Bnei Reuven? They go with the Nisi'im, and what do they accuse them of? So there's a few accusations, right? They accuse them of building this Mizbeach, to rebelling against God. They remind them in Pasuk Yud Zayin of the Avon of Baal Peor that we're still not pure of, and the negef that it caused. They remind them that, or they tell them that this is an act of rebellion against God in Yud Het, which will later be confused with almost Avodah Zarah. And in Yud Tet, there is a invitation to come back. Not Eretz Ahuzatchem, come to Eretz Ahuzat Hashem. Come back. Asher shakan sham mishkan Hashem. Ve'hazu betochenu. ובאדוני אל תמרודו, ואותנו אל תמרודו, בבנותיכם לכם מזבח מבלעדי מזבח השם. And then they go back to a bizarre story of Achan. They say, oh, remember of Achan? Remember the story of Achan? Ma'al baherem. And everyone was punished. What's the point of this? The point of this seems to be, well, listen, if you think you're just sinning, you're putting us all in danger. Right? One person was punished and everyone was killed. But that's something interesting. It might be also here a double message. One is, don't put us in danger. B, when does this happen? One person sins and everyone gets killed. That only happens in Eretz Israel. The sins of the Midbar and the punishments, who was punished? Very clearly every time. The sinners. Hayta Egel, Hayta Braglim. In Eretz Israel, we're one people. So while it's dangerous, it's also part of the invitation. Go ahead, come back. So, again, after an attack, after an accusation, they're put in place to defend themselves and their motivations. And this time they say, ויענו בני ראובן ובני גד וחצי שבט וידברו אל ראשי אלפי ישראל. אל אלוהים השם, אל אלוהים השם, הוא יודע, וישראל הוא ידע, אם במרד יאמר בהשם, אל תושיענו היום הזה. So by the way, God forbid, we would not rebel against God. We would never build the Mizbeach Lashub Me'acharei Hashem. We would never offer Olam Mincha. You misread us. And here maybe they really did misread them. That's the Baal Peor thing. No. God forbid. Avodah Zarah? Never. No. You don't understand. We would never offer it. We would never make an offering to other gods. We would never offer to God outside of the Mishkan. We would not do that. Now, why did we do this? Pasuk Kaf Daled. Im lo mida'aga midavar asinu et zot. Why? Because tomorrow, your children will tell our children, what do you have to do with God? We're not part of the same nation. And therefore, we built this to indicate that we are part of the same nation. Now, if you were Pinehas or Yehoshua, what would you be doing right now? Well, based on the way we just explained it, you'd be rolling your eyes and say, oh my gosh, these guys don't get it. Come on. That's going to do it. The Mizbeach? No, because they felt the problem. They understood it. They finally got what they didn't get. They finally remembered 14 years ago what Moshe meant. I got it now. It's clear. But you know what? Okay. I know we got to be in Israel, and if we don't be in Israel, we're going to miss things out. We're not really part of Jewish people, but it's okay. We'll build shuls. Right? We'll be okay. We're going to build this big symbol. It's going to make us all one, right? Everything's going to be good. זוגבו נתן השם בינינו וביניכם, בני ראובן, בני גד הירדן, אין לכם חלק באדוני, והשביתו ביניכם את בנינו. They'll knock us out. Your children are going to be the reason why we're not one. נעשה לנו לבנות את המזבח, לא לעולה ולזבה, כי עדו ביני וביניכם ובין דורותינו אחרינו לעבוד את השם. So, and they continue in this lengthy, we will never be mored against Hashem. No, even. וישמע פנחס הכהן עושה העדה וראשי אלפי ישראל אשר איתו את הדברים אשר דיברו ביד ראובן, ביד בני גד, ויטב ביניהם. They say, okay, ויטב ביניהם. And they tell them, it's okay. And they were one, they avoided the war, everyone was happy. ויברכו אלוהים בני ישראל. They didn't go לצבא לשחט את הארץ. And everything is great. Right? Everything is great. Yep, could I borrow Tanakh, please? And they needed to be, everyone was satisfied, and everything's happy. And, okay, so now, Divrei Yamim Aleph, Perek He. Psukim, someone's going to read this, because just as you don't think I'm looking for the morbid ending. So someone read it. Someone pick. It's only Divrei Yamim Aleph, Perek He, Psukim, Kaf He, Kaf Vav. Any volunteer? This is before any galut, even of the Aseret Shvatim. Reuben, Gad, Hatzi Menashe want to stay on that side. They want to follow their mikneh. We'll be okay. Right? We'll be one with you. Right? We have a mizbeah. We're one people. But what happens? Pul Melech Ashur, Vayaglem, these are the first of the tribes to go into Galut, and they stay there ad hayom hazeh. That means they really just assimilated, never returned, and who knows if ever to return. Ad hayom hazeh, the end of the period of Tanakh. The period of Tanakh has nothing else to say about them. Right? We don't have those positive nivuot about these like we do at times of Yirmiyah. When he comes, Ephraim and Yehuda will be one, right? Reuven, Gad, Hatzi Menashe, Ad hayom hazeh are lost. That is the final word, chronologically, that the Tanakh has to say about these people. So, with the best of intentions, and we believe that there were the best of intentions, right? What is the message here? Moshe was right. He understood what was happening here. He had concerns. The concerns were, I'm going to lose part of Am Yisrael, but the bigger concern was what they're going to do to the rest of the nation. They didn't get it, but he at least mitigated the problem, stopping the entrance in the Kibush Eretz Yisrael. Yehoshua, hints to them to go back. They get the message. But instead of heeding the message, they try with the best of intentions to avoid an inevitable conclusion. Am Yisrael approaches them, the leaders, and they say, we got a problem, an immediate problem. We got a double problem again. Is this an avodah zarah? Is this peor? No, God forbid. Okay. By the way, come back. Eretz Tehorah. We have a Mishkan. Where are you going? No. By the way, you misread us. We got this Mishkan. We're one people. All right. Okay. Hope so. Good luck. Remember, keep Torah. Here's a beracha. And we'll see you. And the end is that the best of intentions on earth, so close, but so far. You are in or you're out. You're part of Am Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, or you're not. The best of intentions, the hardest and most difficult sacrifices. But still, what was really important to you was mikneh. What was really important to you, right, was the checkbook. That was what was it. And you thought you can have your cake and eat it too? And you thought you could follow Lot's path? Choose the land he chose? But still somehow be connected to the children of Abraham? A valiant effort. One that would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. One that was, from the very beginning, doomed to fail, and one that caused galut and the loss of a chunk of Am Yisrael. So, not to end on that, what is the story with Menashe? So the Ramban, just as an aside, as what we'll call a nispah to this, really what was happening with Menashe? It's a strange thing. So the Ramban says something interesting. The Ramban says Moshe sent him there on purpose. Because he realized, for the Ramban, the reason he sent him there on purpose was, and if you look at it, it's not even half of them. Even what's called Hatzi. Hatzi doesn't always mean half. Hatzi can mean elsewhere a portion. It's not always half, right? You'll see elsewhere where it says Hatzi. So a portion of Menashe, it seems to be a small portion. And in fact, I think it's Ibn Ezra who points out that Machir is not even a direct paternal descendant of Menashe, but of Yehuda. Right? Ibn Ezra? Yeah. Oh, it's in Divrei Yamim. He points out from Divrei Yamim, but over here. So he sends a small group, an entourage. So the Ramban says because he realizes there was a lot of land and we needed more people to populate it. Maybe that, or maybe Moshe sent them. Maybe that was Moshe's ed. Maybe Moshe was trying to salvage the day by taking a shevet and almost splitting it across so that there might stay one people and one connection. Right? Maybe that it could have been, because if you see, it's after the deal. Moshe gives this group of people. I mean, it's difficult to say that because of what happened at the end. What was Moshe? Was that a sacrificial goat? But nevertheless, it is potential that Ramban does say that Moshe purposely sent them there after the fact. So that might have been the motivation.